I was 35 years old when this happened, and I lived on the outskirts of Columbia, Missouri. That day I had spent the entire afternoon in a small town a little over 2 hours from home, attending the funeral of a distant aunt. We weren't close, but I was the only family member who lived relatively nearby, so I ended up going alone. The funeral was simple, the kind held in old churches, with little heating and cold wooden pews. I left early in the evening, emotionally drained, with a headache and that heavy feeling that lingers after hours of listening to people speak quietly and avoiding silence. All I wanted was to get home. I chose to return via a less busy state highway, something I'd done before. It was darker, but usually faster. The sky was clear, no rain, no fog, just cold. I turned on the heater, mounted my phone on the dashboard with the GPS on, and kept driving. There were hardly any cars, just an occasional set of distant headlights. The road was long, straight in many stretches, bordered by fields and small patches of trees. There was no lighting, just my car's headlights and the white line sliding beneath them. About 20 minutes later, I saw an old pickup truck parked on the right shoulder. It was dark, hard to tell the color, maybe green or blue, one of those older, boxy models. I instinctively slowed down, trying to see if anyone was outside the vehicle or if there was some sign of trouble. The hood was closed, no hazard lights were on. The driver was inside. I could see his outline through the window, sitting upright, turned slightly in my direction. As I passed, he slowly turned his head, following my car with his eyes. That made me uncomfortable, but I kept going. I figured it might be someone waiting for help or for a cell signal. I checked the rearview mirror for a few seconds, but he stayed parked. I kept driving, trying not to dwell on it. A few miles later, I started feeling that heavy fatigue in my shoulders that comes from driving at night after a long day, and I turned the radio up a bit, just to stay alert. About 10 minutes later, I saw another pickup truck on the shoulder. My stomach tightened before I was even sure it was the same one. As I got closer, I recognized the shape. The same old model, parked the same way with no lights on. The driver was there again, seated the same way, looking in my direction. It made no sense. I hadn't turned around, hadn't taken any side roads, hadn't stopped. The highway was continuous, and there was no way that pickup could have passed me without my noticing. I drove past it again, my heart racing, and felt a dry chill run up my spine when I saw his face turn slowly, tracking my car exactly as before. This time I gripped the steering wheel harder. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself it could be a different pickup that just looked similar, that I was too tired to notice details properly. Even so, I started watching the mirrors too closely, expecting to see headlights turn on behind me. I didn't see anything. The road stayed empty and silent, just the steady sound of tires on asphalt and warm air blowing from the vents. A few minutes later, I was genuinely nervous. The radio wasn't helping anymore, so I turned it off. The silence inside the car seemed to amplify everything. The engine noise, my breathing, the faint creak of the seat when I shifted. That's when I saw the pickup for the third time. It was parked on the shoulder again, now on a more enclosed stretch of road, with trees closer on both sides. There was no denying it was the same one, same position, same type of vehicle, same motionless driver looking in my direction. This time, when I passed, he didn't just turn his head. He leaned forward slightly, as if trying to get a better look at me. My entire body went on alert. I felt heat rise to my face despite the cold night. I checked the rearview mirror almost immediately and saw something that made my heart pound. The pickup's headlights turned on. It pulled off the shoulder and onto the road behind me, keeping an exact distance, not too close, not too far. I sped up a little. It sped up too. I slowed down. It slowed down with me. It felt like no matter what I did, it would stay there. The next minutes were the longest I've ever experienced while driving. I kept shifting my gaze between the road and the mirror, trying to measure the distance between us, and it never changed. It was always the same, as if someone had calculated it. It didn't tailgate, didn't try to pass, didn't flash its lights, it just followed. I tried changing lanes when the road allowed it, just to see if there would be any reaction. The pickup changed lanes too, maintaining alignment. At one point, I passed a sign indicating a secondary access road to a rural route. I considered turning, but the thought of being alone on an even smaller road scared me more than staying where I was. I grabbed my phone and tried calling a friend, but the call wouldn't go through. The signal dropped. Time passed, and I felt the muscles in my neck aching with tension, my mouth dry, my breathing shallow. I kept telling myself it was just a strange driver, maybe someone messing with me, maybe trying to scare me, but none of that explained the precision with which the pickup copied everything I did. This wasn't chaotic pursuit, it was accompaniment. After more than half an hour like that, the road became narrower and darker. That's when the pickup slowly started to pull closer until it was driving alongside my car. It didn't accelerate suddenly. It eased up, occupying the space beside me as if it were normal. I could see the outline of the driver through the window, but I couldn't make out his face clearly. He wasn't looking ahead. He was turned toward me. Panic surged from my stomach to my chest. I tried to accelerate to get away, but he matched my speed, keeping the truck exactly alongside mine, narrowing my options until I had none. I started braking instinctively, afraid of veering off the road, and he did the same, forcing both vehicles to slow together. My car nearly stopped. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my throat. Then, out of nowhere, the pickup began to lose definition at the edge of my vision. It didn't pass me. It didn't fall back. It simply drifted to the right and disappeared into the darkness, as if it had never been there. The road was empty again, far too silent. I sat there for a few seconds, shaking before I could bring myself to move on. It took me several minutes to accelerate again. My hands were numb on the steering wheel, and I had to take deep breaths to keep from crying right there. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting the headlights to reappear, but the road stayed empty as if nothing had happened. The silence inside the car was deafening now. The radio was still off, and I didn't have the courage to turn it back on. Every dark stretch felt longer than before, and any distant reflection made me grip the wheel tightly. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears and a strange pressure in my chest, as if my body was still reacting to danger even after it had vanished. At times, I caught myself slowing down without realizing it, afraid that stopping might draw attention even though there was no one there. I just wanted to reach a place with lights. Any place. A few miles later, I passed a small closed gas station with only the exterior lights on. I considered stopping, but something in me said not to turn off the car. I kept going, mentally repeating the route home. When I finally entered an area with more activity with a few houses and streetlights, I felt part of my body relax for the first time since the pickup appeared behind me. Even so, I kept watching the mirrors until I parked in my garage. I sat in the car for a few minutes with the engine off, listening to the metal ticking as it cooled and trying to process what had just happened. There was no explanation that fully made sense, and that unsettled me even more. The feeling wasn't relief, it was that something had simply decided to leave. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of the pickup pulling alongside me came back forcefully, along with the feeling of having no control at all. I kept telling myself it had just been a strange driver, someone trying to intimidate me, but that didn't explain the repeated stops on the shoulder or the way he kept appearing ahead of me. It especially didn't explain how he managed to follow me for so long without making a single mistake. The next morning, I woke up feeling heavy, as if I'd spent the entire night on alert. I checked my car, looked around the street, expecting to see that pickup somewhere, but everything was normal. I went to work as usual, but caught myself looking out the window often, with a discomfort I couldn't quite name. I didn't tell the full story to anyone. When I tried to mentally summarize what had happened, it felt too unreal even to me, and that made me even more uneasy. A few days later, I had to drive at night again out of necessity, but I avoided that highway. I took a much longer route, even though I was tired, just to avoid the same stretch. I never saw the pickup again, or anything like it. Still, every time I see a vehicle parked on the shoulder at night, I feel the same tightness in my stomach and slow down, ready to keep going without looking too closely. What stayed with me most wasn't the immediate fear, but the feeling of having been observed and chosen on that specific route, at that specific time, as if I had entered a sequence that wasn't meant for me, and only got out because someone decided it was enough. Even now, when I think about that drive back from the funeral, that empty Missouri highway never feels like just a road. It feels like a place where something waited for me far too long, Sometime later, I tried to reconstruct the route using maps, just to see if there was any point where that pickup could have entered and exited without my noticing. The highway didn't have many access points, almost no easy turnarounds, which only reinforced how strange it was. There was no way it could have passed me before the 3 appearances on the shoulder. There was also nowhere it could have hidden to wait for me to pass again. The more I analyzed it, the clearer it became that this hadn't been a perception error caused by fatigue. I remembered the exact position of the vehicle, the way the driver was seated, the amount of time I spent staring into the mirror looking for any different movement. I remembered, above all, the precision. Nothing was impulsive or clumsy. Everything happened at the right pace, as if someone were calmly guiding the situation without any hurry at all. That's what still bothers me the most. I never went back to that town after the funeral, and whenever I have to drive long distances at night, I choose busier routes, even if they take longer. It's not fear of an accident. It's something else. It's the feeling that certain roads become too open when no one is watching, as if they're opportunities. That night, I felt the pickup wasn't trying to pass me or force me to stop out of anger. It was testing how far it could go without having to explain anything. And when it decided to leave, it did so in the cleanest way possible, leaving no trace, no confirmation. Just absence. Sometimes I think the most frightening part wasn't the moment it pulled alongside my car. It was never knowing why I was allowed to go. Over time, I realized that what affected me most was the feeling of being kept exactly where it wanted me. I wasn't forced off the road. There was no explicit threat, no attempt at communication beyond that silent alignment. Still, I clearly felt my options being reduced little by little until all that was left was to keep going in the way it allowed. That stayed with me in a strange way, more psychological than anything else. In other situations in life, when something goes wrong, there's usually a clear moment you can point to and say, "It was here." That night, there was no such point. Everything was continuous, progressive, as if I'd entered a flow that wasn't mine and only realized it too late. Even now, writing this, I still feel that tightness in my stomach when I remember the exact distance between the vehicles. Always the same, always controlled. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about the driver, not his face, which I never really saw, but his posture. He never seemed nervous, irritated, or rushed. He never asked for help, never signaled, never tried to get attention in any normal way. It was as if he was there only to confirm something, to follow something through to the end. That completely changes how I remember the episode. It didn't feel like someone trying to scare me for fun or cause an accident. It felt like someone waiting for a specific reaction, watching how I handled the situation. And when he decided to end it, he did so quietly, without passing, without leaving any concrete proof. He just left. After that episode, I started paying attention to things that used to be background noise. Old pickups on the shoulder, cars stopped without hazard lights, vehicles that keep too much distance for too long. I don't panic, but I stay alert in a way that wasn't normal before. That night taught me that not every danger comes with urgency or noise. Sometimes it just follows, observes, measures. What unsettles me most is remembering that I was never able to define exactly when the situation truly began. It wasn't at the first parked pickup, nor the second. It was somewhere between noticing the pattern and accepting that I had no control. That matters, because it means that if I had ignored that initial feeling, I might have gone farther than I should have. Today, when I think about that Missouri highway, I don't remember the fear as something explosive. I remember the forced calm, the constant effort to appear normal while everything inside me was screaming that something was wrong. I remember the silence after the pickup disappeared, heavier than before, as if the emptiness had been left there on purpose. I've never had another experience like it, and I hope I never do. But I know that night, driving home from a funeral, I wasn't just driving home. I was being kept in motion by something that decided, for reasons I'll never understand, that it had gone far enough with me. After writing all this, I still try to decide whether what happened was something exceptional or just something that usually goes unnoticed because people don't spend enough time on the road to see patterns. Maybe that pickup was there on other nights with other drivers repeating the same behavior until someone reacted differently than I did. Maybe no one ever talked about it because when it ends, everything returns to normal too quickly. There was no damage to my car, no physical contact, no witnesses, just the very clear memory of something that happened too many times to be coincidence. When I think about it now, what weighs on me most isn't the fear I felt, but the sense of having been guided by a situation that didn't demand immediate reaction, only endurance. And I endured by staying in motion, not stopping, not confronting until it decided to end. I don't tell this story expecting anyone to find an exact explanation. I write it because I still think about that road whenever I drive at night, especially when I'm alone and traffic suddenly disappears. Sometimes danger doesn't come fast, shouting or demanding attention. Sometimes it just appears, waits, reappears, and then follows for far too long. That night in Missouri, driving back from a funeral, I learned that some things on the road don't want help, don't want confrontation, and don't want to be understood. They just want to accompany you as far as they can. And when they disappear, they leave you with the unsettling feeling that it wasn't you who decided when it was over. Story 2. I was 38 years old at the time, and I worked as a maintenance technician at a small hospital in rural Pennsylvania. It wasn't a big city, one of those places where everything closes early and after 10 at night only gas stations and the ER stay open. My shift that day had run late because of a problem with the heating system, and when I finally left it was already past 11:30 at night. It was raining heavily, one of those steady storms with no thunder, just thick constant rain coming down. The hospital parking lot, which usually still had a few cars from the overnight staff, was almost empty. Just a handful of vehicles scattered far apart, reflecting the yellowish light from the lampposts on the wet asphalt. I was exhausted, my back aching, thinking only about getting into my car and going home. The wind pushed the rain into my face and I could feel the cold seeping through my clothes even though it was spring. Everything felt normal, just another too late exit after a long day. I was unlocking my car when I noticed movement between two parked vehicles a few spaces ahead. At first I thought it was another employee, but then a man stepped out of the shadows and spoke to me. He asked for a ride to the main road, just that. His voice was calm, steady, as if it were an ordinary request. He had no umbrella and was soaked from head to toe, but he didn't seem bothered by the rain. He was wearing a plain dark jacket, nothing distinctive, and he didn't look injured or drunk. What caught my attention was the fact that I hadn't seen him approach. The parking lot was open and well lit, and I had just walked through it. I asked where he was coming from, whether he needed help, or if someone could come pick him up. He didn't answer directly. He just repeated that he needed to get to the main road. That made me uncomfortable. It wasn't a desperate plea or someone explaining a situation. It was as if he were simply stating something I was supposed to accept. I said I couldn't give him a ride, that I was tired and just wanted to go straight home. I didn't say it harshly, just firmly. He stood there for a second, looking at me, rain running down his face without him even blinking. Then he took a step closer to the car and repeated the request in the same tone, without raising his voice or changing his expression. That put me even more on edge. I opened the car door quickly, got in, and locked it as soon as I sat down. As I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw that he had stepped back a few paces, standing between the parking spaces, just watching. He didn't wave, didn't curse, didn't try to approach again. He just stood there motionless as I drove out of the lot. The feeling was strange, like I had ended something without knowing exactly what it was. When I turned out of the hospital exit, I checked the side mirror and saw him still in the same spot, small under the rain, far too still for someone who had just been turned down. I drove slowly at first, more because of the wet road than fear. The rain kept pounding the windshield in a steady rhythm that turned into background noise. The road connecting the hospital to the main highway was long and poorly lit, with several miles of nothing but trees and fields. I tried to convince myself that the encounter had just been uncomfortable, nothing more. Even so, I couldn't stop thinking about how he had appeared in the parking lot without my noticing, or how he'd avoided answering simple questions about where he'd come from. A few miles later, coming out of a gentle curve, I saw something ahead in the road. I slowed instinctively. Standing in the middle of the lane, exactly between the lines, was a figure. When the headlights illuminated it more clearly, my stomach dropped. It was the same man. He was standing there under the heavy rain, motionless, staring straight at my car, as if he had always been there. There were no vehicles nearby, no visible side roads, no immediate explanation for how he could have gotten there ahead of me. I slammed on the brakes and the car slowed too fast, nearly skidding on the wet asphalt. For a few seconds, I didn't know what to do. He didn't move, didn't try to step out of the lane, didn't raise a hand. He just stood there in the center of the road, rain pouring over his shoulders, staring into the headlights. His face was clearer now, fully lit, and his expression was the same as in the parking lot. Neutral, unhurried, not angry. He didn't look like someone trying to cross or ask for help. He looked like someone waiting. I honked once, short and sharp, more out of reflex than choice. He didn't react. My heart started pounding too hard, and I felt heat rise in my chest despite the cold air inside the car. I glanced quickly to the sides, looking for room to swerve, but the road was narrow and the shoulder nearly non-existent there. I slowed even more, almost stopping, afraid of hitting someone who clearly wasn't behaving like anyone normal. Just as I was about to come to a complete stop, he took one slow step to the side, out of the car's path. But it wasn't startled or last minute. It was deliberate, as if he had been waiting for that exact moment. I passed him slowly, shivering when I saw out of the corner of my eye that he turned his body to follow the car, the same way he had in the parking lot. As soon as I passed, I checked the rearview mirror. He was standing in the middle of the road again, now with his back to me, staring into the darkness behind. I didn't see him walk there. He was just there. I accelerated without thinking twice, feeling the car respond heavily on the wet road. I didn't stop until I reached the main highway where there were more lights and more cars. Only then did I slow down, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. What terrified me most wasn't seeing him again. It was the certainty that somehow he hadn't needed a ride to get there before me. I kept driving for several more minutes after that, even though I was already in a better lit area, unable to relax. The rain kept falling, but now there were other cars around, which helped a little keep me grounded. Still, I checked the rearview mirror constantly, expecting to see someone standing in the road again. I didn't. When I finally got home, I sat in the car for a few minutes with the engine running, trying to slow my breathing. I went inside, locked the door, and went straight to the living room window, looking out at the empty street. Everything looked far too normal. I spent the rest of the night awake, replaying every detail. The way he asked for the ride, how he dodged simple questions, and especially how he appeared on the road with no practical explanation. It made no sense that he could have left the parking lot, gotten ahead of me, and stopped exactly there, especially on foot in heavy rain. The next day, I casually asked a coworker at the hospital if anyone had been stuck there after my shift. He said no, that once the storm worsened, hardly anyone went out, and he didn't remember any visitor or staff member walking around the parking lot that late. I thought about calling the police, but I had nothing concrete to report. No direct threat, no crime, just a strange encounter that ended without proof. Even so, for weeks afterward, I avoided leaving work late when it was raining. Every time I drove that secondary road, I slowed down at that specific stretch, almost expecting to see someone standing there again. I never did. But the feeling that the man hadn't been trying to leave the hospital, rather trying to accompany me to a certain point, never went away. After that night, I started paying attention to how specific his request had been. He didn't ask for help, didn't ask for shelter from the rain, didn't ask to use a phone. He asked for a ride to the main road, as if he already knew exactly which route I would take and where I would be minutes later. That kept echoing in my head in the days that followed. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that he didn't seem lost or exhausted. He seemed like someone trying to move along with me, as if standing still wasn't really an option. The way he insisted, without raising his voice, without arguing, just repeating the request, made it feel like part of a process, not a desperate attempt. And when I refused, he didn't react like someone upset. He just watched, as if adjusting something internally. What bothered me even more was remembering that when I saw him on the road, he showed no surprise at all. He didn't wave, didn't run toward the car, didn't make any gesture asking for help. He was simply there, occupying the exact space that forced me to slow down. It was as if that was the place he truly needed to be, not the parking lot. The heavy rain didn't seem to affect him at all. Same posture, same expression. That ruled out any chance that he had run there or gotten a ride from someone else in that short time. Even if he had, someone would have noticed a drenched man asking for a ride in a storm like that. Nothing like that came up later. Only I saw him. What unsettled me most as time went on was realizing that if I had accepted the ride, I wouldn't know exactly when it would have become the wrong moment. There was no spike of aggression, no sudden shift in behavior that would serve as a clear warning. Everything was steady, controlled, far too predictable. He chose where to appear, chose what to say, and chose the exact point on the road where he would make me slow down. That isn't something you can explain as coincidence. I started wondering whether the request in the parking lot hadn't actually been a simple test to see if I would open the door, if I would let him share the same enclosed space with me, if I would agree to continue with him longer than I should. Refusing didn't end the situation. It just moved it to a place where he could still find me without needing to get into the car. A few weeks later, I drove that same stretch on a dry day, still in daylight. I pulled over for a few seconds just to look at the exact spot where he had stood in the rain. There was nothing there, no hidden entrance, no path, no nearby house. Just asphalt, weeds, and the gentle curve of the road. I didn't stay long and drove away with a strange sense of unease, as if stopping there was a wrong choice in itself. Since then, I avoid that parking lot when I leave late and change my route home whenever I can. Not because I'm certain something bad would happen, but because that night made one thing clear to me. That man wasn't trying to get to the main road. He already knew exactly where it was. He just needed me to be in the right place at the right time to continue. After writing all this, I still have the feeling that that night didn't truly end when I got home. There was no real closure, no explanation that neatly connected the beginning and the end. It was just a sequence of events that stopped happening. That's what bothers me most when I remember it. If it had been a failed robbery or someone clearly trying something wrong, I could have boxed it away mentally and moved on. But it wasn't that. It was someone appearing where it made no sense, asking for something far too specific, and then appearing again miles ahead with no visible effort. The road was empty, the rain heavy, and still he was there before me, standing as if he had arrived too early. To this day, when I leave work late and the parking lot is nearly empty, I pay too much attention to the spaces between cars. Any movement out of place makes me stop and watch before getting into my vehicle. It isn't constant paranoia, it's memory. That night taught me that not every request for a ride is about getting somewhere. Sometimes it's about accompanying someone along a specific stretch, testing how far that person will let the situation go. I don't know what would have happened if I had accepted. And maybe that's exactly what brings me the most peace. What I do know is that on that rain-soaked road in Pennsylvania, under a downpour heavy enough that no one should have been on foot, I saw a man arrive where he shouldn't have been able to arrive. And that was enough to change how I end my nights ever since. Story 3. I was 27 years old when this happened, and I was traveling at night with my wife to visit her relatives in a rural area of Arkansas. We were living in Little Rock at the time, and the visit had been somewhat last minute, so we left early on a Saturday evening. We didn't know the region we were heading to very well, and relied entirely on the GPS. It was one of those state highways that gradually gets narrower, with less lighting and almost no traffic after a certain point. The radio barely came in, cell service cut in and out, and the surroundings were basically dark fields, old fences, and a few stretches of dense woods. The night was hot and humid with no wind, and driving through that darkness gave an odd sense of isolation, as if the road belonged only to us. We talked very little, more from fatigue than anything else, just following the GPS directions and hoping to arrive soon. After almost an hour driving through that more remote stretch, the GPS warned that we would be crossing a narrow bridge just ahead. I automatically slowed down, since the road was already rough and had no shoulder. That was when we saw a light moving up ahead. As we got closer, we realized it was a man standing before the bridge, in the middle of the lane, waving a flashlight toward us. He was swinging his arm urgently and shouting something we couldn't make out from a distance. I stopped the car a few meters from him, my foot on the brake and my heart racing. He came a bit closer and said hurriedly that we couldn't cross the bridge, that a serious accident had just happened there a few minutes earlier. He spoke too fast, slightly out of breath, but didn't look injured. There were no cars stopped nearby, no sirens, no lights other than his flashlight and our headlights. That immediately made us both suspicious. I asked where the accident was and whether anyone had called for help. He vaguely pointed to the other side of the bridge and said you couldn't see it from there, that we needed to turn back. My wife squeezed my arm and whispered that it didn't seem right. The man wasn't wearing a uniform, didn't have a radio, didn't have a reflective vest. The flashlight was a simple one, nothing official. I asked which way we should go instead, and he fell silent for a second that felt too long before repeating only that it wasn't safe to cross. He didn't explain an alternate route, didn't mention police or an ambulance. He just insisted we shouldn't pass. I looked at the bridge ahead. It was short. You could clearly see the other side lit by our headlights. There was no sign of a collision, no debris, nothing blocking it. That made my stomach turn. I thanked him and said we would check quickly. He took a step back but kept staring fixedly at the car as if calculating something. I put the car in gear and moved forward slowly. My wife watched him through the side window as we passed. He didn't try to physically stop us, didn't shout anything else. He just stood there, following the car with his eyes, the flashlight lowered now, no longer illuminating anything. We crossed the bridge carefully. The asphalt was intact, dry, with no sign of any recent accident. No tire marks, no objects, no people. On the other side, I slowed down and checked the rearview mirror almost immediately. The man was now standing right in the middle of the lane, exactly where the bridge began, motionless, staring in our direction. He was no longer waving or shouting, just watching. That was when we saw headlights appear behind us out of nowhere, far too close for a road that had been empty seconds earlier. My heart leapt instantly. I glanced forward and then back to the mirror, trying to understand where that car had come from. The road before the bridge was straight and open enough that I should have seen any headlights approaching, and I hadn't seen anything. Still, there was a vehicle behind us, keeping a distance that was too short for someone who had just appeared. It didn't honk, didn't try to pass, just stayed there. My wife asked, her voice tense, if I had seen that too, and I said yes, trying to stay calm. I sped up a little to create distance. The car behind sped up as well. It didn't tailgate, but it didn't fall back either. I checked the mirror again and saw the man still standing in the middle of the lane, now smaller as we pulled away, but not moving, as if he had no interest in that other vehicle. That gave me a strange sense that we had been the focus, not the bridge. We drove in silence for several minutes. The car behind us stayed there, always at the same distance, not flashing its lights, not changing lanes when the road widened slightly. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself it could just be another lost couple using GPS like we were. Even so, the coincidence felt too heavy. The road remained deserted, with no houses, no clear intersections. At one point, the GPS recalculated the route for a few seconds, and that was when I felt a tightness in my chest, as if relying solely on that electronic voice was a mistake. The vehicle behind us kept following, steady and constant, as if it knew exactly where we were going even before we did. After a few more miles like that, I saw a small sign indicating access to a secondary road leading to a more populated area. I decided to turn without warning, more on impulse than by plan. I slowed quickly and turned onto the dirt road, feeling the car bounce over the uneven surface. For a few seconds, I thought the vehicle behind would continue straight, but almost immediately I saw its headlights turn as well. That made my wife catch her breath. The dirt road was narrow, completely unlit, lined with trees on both sides, and the GPS took a few seconds to adjust. I could feel sweat running down my back even with the window open. The car behind kept the same distance without complaint, without trying to pass, as if the change hadn't surprised it at all. A few minutes later, the dirt road met another state highway, wider than the last. As soon as I merged onto it, I accelerated more than I should have. The car behind followed for a short stretch and then, without warning, slowed down and fell back, eventually turning off in another direction I didn't clearly see. There was no passing, no honking, no flashing lights. It simply stopped being there. I only slowed down once I was sure we were alone again. My wife looked back several times, trying to see if the man from the bridge was still there, but the road curved too much to see anything. The silence inside the car was heavy, and neither of us felt like breaking it. We kept driving for a long time with hardly any conversation. I only answered when my wife asked if I thought the car could come back. At every curve, I slowed a little, expecting to see headlights in the mirror again. They never appeared. Even so, the feeling of being followed wouldn't go away. The GPS finally stabilized and showed that we were back on the correct route to her relative's house. When we passed through a small village with a few lit houses and an open gas station, I felt my body relax a little. I pulled into the station saying I needed to use the bathroom, but really I just wanted to stop somewhere with people around. I got out of the car and looked back down the road we had come from. Nothing. No vehicles, no standing silhouette, no sign of the man from the bridge. The road looked far too ordinary, as if everything that had happened had left no trace at all. Inside the station, I quickly told the attendant that we had almost crossed a bridge where a man claimed there had been an accident. He frowned and said he hadn't heard anything about an accident in that area that night. He added that the bridge was old but always in use, and that nobody usually stood there signaling traffic, much less alone. That sent a chill up my spine. I thanked him, went back to the car, and we continued the trip without stopping again. We arrived at the relative's house late and tried to act normal, but both of us were visibly tense. The image of the man standing before the bridge and later in the middle of the road kept coming back to my mind, especially the way he never truly tried to stop us, only to observe. That night we barely slept. We stayed in the guest room listening to the normal sounds of the house, the creaking floorboards, the faint wind against the windows, but everything sounded louder than it should have. I found myself getting up several times to look out the window, expecting to see headlights on the dirt road in front of the house. I didn't see anything. Still, the sense of alertness wouldn't fade. What bothered me most was remembering the man's tone on the bridge. He didn't sound nervous or desperate, just determined to make us not cross. And when we did cross, he didn't run after us or try to stop us. He just stayed there standing still as if his part was already done. In the morning, in daylight, I tried to convince myself it had all been nothing more than a strange sequence of coincidences. The bridge was there, intact, just as it always had been. No sign of an accident, no evidence of emergency maintenance. I asked one of the relatives if anything had happened on the road that night, and he said no, that he would have heard about it. That should have closed the matter, but it didn't. Because if there was no accident, then the warning wasn't about the bridge. And if the warning wasn't about the bridge, I couldn't stop thinking about what exactly he was trying to stop us from doing, or lead us to do. After we returned home a few days later, I tried researching that region on my own. I looked for news of accidents, closures, anything related to that bridge or the surrounding roads. I found nothing. No mention in local newspapers, no alerts, no comments on regional forums. That left me with a strange sense of emptiness, as if the episode had happened outside the normal record of things. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that the man wasn't there to help after an accident. He was there before one, positioned, prepared. The way he emerged from the darkness, how he already knew exactly where to stand, how he didn't move when we crossed, it all suggested that his role didn't depend on what was on the other side of the bridge. It depended on our decision. Today, whenever we drive at night on rural roads, we avoid relying solely on the GPS. If something feels wrong, if someone tries to direct us without a clear explanation, we stop, reassess, change routes, even if it takes longer. That night in Arkansas taught me that not every warning comes to prevent an obvious accident. Sometimes it comes to test whether you'll obey without understanding why. The bridge was intact, but what came after it clearly wasn't coincidence. Even now, when I think about the man standing motionless in the middle of the road, watching as another car appeared behind us, the feeling that remains is simple and unsettling. Crossing was our choice, but what followed didn't feel entirely like it was. Story 4. I was 21 years old when this happened, and I lived alone in a small town in rural Indiana, the kind where everyone knows each other by name and almost nothing happens after 10 at night. I attended the local university during the day and worked part-time at a 24-hour pharmacy to pay rent and basic expenses. On that particular night, I left work later than usual because I had to cover another person's shift. It was already past midnight when I got into my car. The parking lot was almost empty, the air cold and dry, and the town had that heavy silence typical of weekdays. I had driven that route dozens of times and knew the residential streets that cut through to my house well. I turned the radio on low just so I wouldn't be driving in complete silence and started heading home, more tired than alert, thinking only about getting there, taking a shower, and sleeping. After a few blocks, I turned onto a longer, poorly lit street lined with old houses and large trees. That was where I saw the school bus for the first time. It was coming in the opposite direction, moving far too slowly for that street. It was an old yellow school bus, one of those boxier models, clearly older than the ones I usually saw during the day. What caught my attention immediately was the fact that it was completely dark inside. No interior, lights on, no children, no visible movement. When it passed me, I felt a strange sense of discomfort, but I kept going. A few seconds later, when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw that the bus had turned the corner and was now coming up behind me. It didn't speed up to tail me, but it kept a constant distance. That made no sense. It wasn't route time, it wasn't near any school, and that street wasn't even part of a normal bus route. Even so, I tried not to think too much about it and kept driving. I turned right at the next intersection, expecting the bus to continue straight, but it turned as well. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself it could be a lost driver or someone taking the vehicle to a garage, but that didn't explain the hour or the route. The streets became more residential with single-story houses, few lights on, and cars parked on both sides. The bus stayed behind me, always at the same distance, without honking, without turning on high beams, without signaling anything. Its engine made a low, steady sound, different from the usual noise of cars passing at night. I checked the mirror several times, trying to see the driver, but the windshield reflected only darkness. I couldn't see any face. I began to feel my heart speed up, that kind of alert that comes before you consciously decide something is wrong. I slowed down a bit. The bus slowed too. I sped up slightly. It matched me. The feeling of being followed became impossible to ignore. I tried changing routes 2 more times, turning onto streets that only residents usually use, thinking no normal bus would go that way. It followed everyone. At one point, I went over a speed bump and slowed almost to a stop. The bus went over the bump right after, heavy, making the body sway but without losing rhythm. No interior light came on at any point. That bothered me more than if I had seen someone inside. The complete darkness made it seem like the bus was empty, but the running engine said otherwise. I started to feel a tightness in my stomach and that strange heat in my face, even with the cold outside. I thought about calling someone, but my phone battery was low, and I didn't want to take my eyes off the road. My house wasn't that far anymore, but those last few blocks began to feel far too long. When I turned onto my street, I hoped the bus would finally keep going. That street was short, strictly residential, with no easy exit for large vehicles. Still, as soon as I turned, I saw the bus make the turn behind me with difficulty, taking up almost the entire width of the road. That made my whole body go fully on alert. There was no longer any way to pretend it was a coincidence. I slowed down gradually, looking for a place to park quickly. All the houses were dark, windows closed, no movement. I parked in front of my house, almost scraping the curb, and turned off the car before I was even properly aligned. The bus stopped right behind me, blocking the entire front of my house. The engine stayed on. No door opened. No light came on. I sat there for a few seconds, trying to decide what to do, my hand shaking on the key. I grabbed my bag, got out of the car, and walked quickly to my front door, feeling the bus behind me like an overwhelmingly heavy presence. I didn't run, but I walked as fast as I could without tripping. While unlocking the door, I could still hear the bus engine running steadily without variation. I went inside and locked everything as soon as I closed the door. I turned off the living room light and went to the side window, looking carefully. The bus was still parked in front of my house, completely dark inside, engine running, no one getting out. I stood there watching for several minutes, my heart pounding, waiting for any movement that would explain it. Nothing happened. After a stretch of time that felt far too long, the bus simply shut off the engine, sat in silence for a few seconds, then started up again and slowly drove away, without honking, without turning on any interior lights, disappearing at the end of the street. I stayed frozen inside for a long time, unable to move, listening as the silence slowly returned. The house felt different, smaller, as if the outside had left some kind of mark. I waited a few more minutes before turning on any lights, and even then I kept them low. I checked the front and side windows several times, expecting to see the bus stopped farther down or circling the block. I saw nothing. Even so, the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. I took a quick shower with the bathroom door unlocked, something I never did, and went to bed without taking my eyes off the window. I slept badly, waking up at every distant engine sound, convinced I would hear that heavy engine again at any moment. The next morning, I woke up with the strange feeling that the night before hadn't been a dream. I left for work earlier than usual, and as I passed in front of my house, looked for marks on the asphalt, anything that indicated a large vehicle had been parked there for several minutes. There was nothing. No oil stains, no tire marks different from the others. On the way, I passed a regular school bus stop and looked at the vehicles parked at the municipal garage. They all looked newer than the one I had seen. When I got to work, I casually mentioned to a coworker that I had seen a school bus driving around late at night in the neighborhood. She frowned and said that was strange because buses didn't operate outside of scheduled hours or drive around without authorization. That echoed in my head for the rest of the day. At the end of that same day, I decided to call the city's school transportation office, trying to sound casual, as if it were just curiosity. I asked if any bus had had mechanical trouble the night before, or if any driver had been assigned a route outside of hours. The woman on the other end checked quickly and said no. She said no bus was authorized to circulate after 9 at night, and that besides that, almost all of them were already parked for maintenance. When I briefly described the older model, she paused briefly and said those buses weren't even in use anymore. They had been parked for months. I hung up with a tightness in my chest that didn't go away. There was no simple explanation for what I had seen, and that made me more nervous than any strange answer would have. That night I drove home earlier than necessary, just to avoid repeating the timing. Even so, every dark street put me on edge. I checked the rearview mirror constantly, expecting to see the large yellow silhouette appear behind me again. It didn't. I parked, went inside, and locked everything as if protecting myself from something that could still arrive. I spent a long time sitting on the couch with the TV off, listening to the normal sounds of the house and trying to convince myself nothing else would happen. Still, every time a vehicle passed in the distance, I held my breath, waiting to hear that heavy, steady engine. The hardest part was accepting that if no one was authorized to be out that night, then the bus wasn't simply lost. It was there for another reason. As the days passed, I began to notice how that night had seeped into small parts of my routine. I avoided going out late, even when I needed to. When I did go out, I chose busier streets, even if they were longer. Whenever I saw a school bus during the day, I felt a strange tightness in my chest, especially if it was an older model. The image of the completely dark interior came back vividly. What bothered me most was remembering that at no point did the bus do anything clearly aggressive. It didn't honk, didn't speed up, didn't open the door. It just followed, turned when I turned, stopped when I stopped, and stayed there, running as if the goal was simply to be present in that specific moment. That made it harder to explain and harder to forget. A few nights later, I mentioned what had happened to an older neighbor who lived next door. I didn't go into detail, just said a bus had stopped in front of my house late at night. He was silent for a few seconds before saying it wasn't common for buses to pass through there even during the day, much less after midnight. He commented that years ago, when the neighborhood was emptier, some people claimed to see large vehicles driving around outside of hours, but it always became an uncomfortable topic, so no one pressed it. He didn't say anything else after that, just shrugged and changed the subject. That brief conversation unsettled me more than any direct answer would have. After that, I tried to move on, but the sense that something abnormal had happened didn't fade with time. What kept coming back to my mind was the detail that the bus had stayed parked in front of my house for several minutes, engine running. It wasn't impulsive, didn't seem like a wrong turn. It was as if it had arrived exactly where it wanted to be and only needed to remain there for a specific amount of time. I kept wondering whether it would have stopped the same way if I had parked at another house on the street, or if the destination had always been that exact spot. That question started to bother me more than the fear itself, because it turned something that seemed random into something far too deliberate. Sometimes when I got home from work, I stayed in the car for a few extra seconds watching the street before getting out. as if expecting to confirm that nothing was out of place. A few weeks later, I ran into an old acquaintance who worked in the city's school fleet maintenance. I casually mentioned that I had seen a bus driving outside of ours, and he immediately said that didn't happen. He said all vehicles were locked in the yard at night and that any departure required formal authorization, which left a record. When I described the older model, he said those were parked, some not even in working condition, waiting to be scrapped. That closed any gap I was still trying to keep open for a simple explanation. I went home that day with a heavy feeling in my chest, not panic but confirmation. I hadn't been mistaken. The bus that followed me that night shouldn't have been operating at all. At that point, I no longer tried to convince myself it had just been something strange but harmless. What troubled me was realizing that everything had happened in a very restrained, almost careful way. There was no direct scare, no attempt to approach, no confrontation. Still, I clearly felt that I was being intentionally followed. The bus didn't hesitate to go down narrow streets, didn't seem lost at any point, and didn't react when I made turns that made no sense for someone just passing through. It stayed there until the end, until I was inside my house with the door closed. Only then did it leave. That removed any sense of chance from the situation. It wasn't someone trying to get somewhere. It was someone, or something, making sure the route ended exactly that way. To this day, when I think about that night, the detail that unsettles me most is the dark interior of the bus. Not seeing anyone inside, no movement, no light at all, while the engine stayed running, created a sensation that's hard to explain. It was as if the vehicle itself was the only thing truly present, without needing to show who was driving it. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been less frightening if I had seen a face, any gesture, something human. Maybe. But the silence, the absence of signals, and the way it simply occupied the space behind me made everything heavier. It didn't feel improvised. It felt repeated, as if that bus had done the same thing before on other nights with other people who may never have talked about it. Over time, that experience stopped being just a fear tied to that specific street and became something broader. I started noticing how the town felt different after a certain hour, how some vehicles seemed out of place when traffic died down. Before, I didn't pay attention to that. Now, anything too large, too slow, or too quiet caught my eye. The school bus became a strange symbol of all this, because it should represent something predictable: routine, clear schedules, children, noise. That night it was exactly the opposite. Silent, out of time, with no apparent purpose. Sometimes I think that if it had been aggressive or done something obvious, I would have gotten over it more easily, but it just stayed there from beginning to end as if simply marking its presence was enough. Today I no longer live in that house. I moved a few months later for other reasons, but I've never been able to fully separate the two. I still return to that town from time to time and drive those streets during the day. Everything looks normal, ordinary, even banal. Even so, I avoid driving alone at night when I'm there. Not because I believe the bus will return, but because I learned that not everything that moves follows clear rules or schedules. That night showed me that something can simply accompany you as far as it wants, stop when you stop, and leave without leaving any trace. And that, to me, was more disturbing than any quick scare. After writing all of this, I still find it hard to explain why that situation affected me so deeply. There was no direct threat, no words spoken, nothing I could point to as an exact moment of danger. Still, the feeling of being followed remains clear in my memory. The bus didn't try to force me to stop, didn't try to block me, didn't do anything that obviously drew attention. It just stayed there, constant, silent, following every decision I made until the moment I could no longer be followed. And that is what unsettled me the most afterward, because it meant it wasn't up to me to decide when it ended. It ended when I was inside my house with the door closed and not before that. The time it stayed parked in front, engine running, felt calculated, as if it were part of the process rather than hesitation. Today, whenever I come home late at night from somewhere and see a vehicle that's too large for the street I'm on, I feel that same tightness in my chest. I don't panic, but I become alert in a way that wasn't normal before. That night in Indiana taught me that not everything out of place needs to act aggressively to be wrong. Sometimes what's truly frightening is something that simply follows, watches, and waits, until you reach where you need to be. The out-of-hours school bus never appeared again, and maybe it never will. But the certainty that it shouldn't have been there, and yet it was, stayed with me. And that's enough for me to never forget that drive home. Story 5. I was 39 years old when this happened, and I was traveling alone through rural Tennessee for work. I did maintenance on agricultural equipment, and that week I had spent the entire day visiting properties spread across very remote areas. By late afternoon, already tired and wanting to get to the motel where I would spend the night, I stopped at a small roadside gas station along the main highway to refuel and ask about directions. The place was simple, with an attached diner and 2 old pumps. While I was paying, I mentioned to a man leaning against the counter that my GPS was suggesting a strange route. He laughed and said that was normal in that area, then commented that there was a better shortcut, a secondary road that cut off a good portion of the drive. He said I would save at least 20 minutes. He spoke casually as if it were something everyone there knew. I asked if it was paved, and he replied that it was, just poorly marked. I thanked him, noted the instructions mentally, and continued on my way, thinking I was simply making my night easier. A few miles later, I left the main highway and entered what did indeed look like a secondary road. The asphalt was darker, without recent markings, and the lighting disappeared almost completely. The road was lined with woods on both sides, with few scattered houses and no clear signs indicating a name or speed limit. At first, I thought nothing of it. Many roads in that region were like that. I drove for a few minutes in silence, with only the sound of the engine and tires on the uneven asphalt. That was when I noticed in the rearview mirror a car appearing behind me. The strange detail was that it had no headlights on at all. It wasn't that it was too far away to illuminate. It was simply dark. I could only make out its silhouette when it passed through small stretches where moonlight faintly lit the road. I slowed down instinctively. The car slowed as well. I sped up slightly. It matched me. That immediately put me on alert because it didn't seem like a coincidence. No one drives without headlights on a road like that by accident. At first, I tried to stay calm and look for a simple explanation. I thought maybe it was someone from the area who knew the road better than I did and didn't mind driving in the dark, or that the headlights were weak and I just couldn't see them properly. Even so, the feeling was far too wrong. I checked the side mirrors, trying to catch any reflection, but the car behind seemed swallowed by the darkness. I slowed a bit. It slowed. I accelerated. It followed, always keeping the exact same distance. It didn't get too close and didn't fall back. That started to give me the sense of being measured, as if the other driver were testing how far I would go. The radio picked up nothing but static, and my phone had lost almost all signal. The road seemed longer than it should have been, with no clear intersections, just gentle curves and trees closing in around it. After a few minutes like that, I started to get genuinely nervous. I tried to pull over to let the car pass, but realized there was practically no shoulder there, just a shallow embankment and vegetation. Besides, something told me stopping wasn't a good idea. I kept driving, eyes fixed on the center line, trying not to show panic. In a more open stretch, I deliberately slowed almost to a crawl just to see if the car behind would pass me. It didn't. It simply slowed as well, keeping the same exact distance. That erased any doubt that this wasn't just someone following the road. It was someone following me. I began to wonder if that shortcut really led anywhere at all, or if I had made a serious mistake by leaving the main highway. After driving like that for some time, I started to realize the road didn't fit the idea of a shortcut. It didn't seem to lead to anywhere specific. There were no signs, no clear entrances to other properties, no lights from houses ahead, just the same dark strip stretching on. I checked the GPS again and saw that it no longer recognized the road. The map showed my car outside of any known route, as if I were driving through a blank area. That gave me an immediate knot in my stomach. I tried to turn around at a slightly wider section, but the car without headlights slowed as well and positioned itself, so I had no safe space to maneuver. It didn't get close enough to touch me, but it blocked the attempt in a way too subtle to be accidental. I kept going, feeling cold sweat run down my back. A few minutes later, I saw what looked like an exit to the right, an even narrower road, almost a dirt path. I ignored it, I kept going until I finally spotted an old, crooked sign indicating access to the main highway a few miles ahead. That brought me immediate relief. I sped up a little, determined to get out of there as fast as possible. The car behind sped up too. At one point, I nearly lost control on a curve, and the car without headlights maintained the exact distance, as if anticipating every move I made. When I finally reached the stretch where the asphalt improved and recognized the entrance to the highway, I turned without a second thought. As soon as I entered the main road, with lighting and clearly marked lanes, I checked the rearview mirror. The car was simply gone. It didn't slow to fall behind, didn't enter the highway, didn't turn back. It just ceased to exist at that point. I pulled over on the shoulder of the main highway a few minutes later, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. My heart took a long time to slow down, and I sat there watching the normal flow of a few cars passing, trying to understand what had just happened. The secondary road I had come from now looked ordinary, just another dark entrance between trees. There was no sign of another vehicle, no light, no movement. I waited a few minutes before driving again, afraid the car without headlights might reappear behind me. It didn't. I continued to the motel, but I arrived far more alert than tired, with the feeling that I had escaped something without knowing exactly what. That night I barely slept, mentally replaying every curve, every copied slowdown, every moment I considered stopping and didn't. In the days that followed, that shortcut wouldn't leave my mind. The more I thought about it, the less sense it made for someone to suggest a road that didn't appear on GPS and seemed to lead nowhere. Before leaving town, I decided to mention what happened to a local police officer while having coffee at a nearby diner. I talked about the alternate route I'd been given and the car that followed me without headlights. His expression changed immediately. He asked exactly where I had entered and how long I had driven there. Then he said in a low voice that there was no official shortcut in that region connecting those 2 points. That road didn't appear on county maps. He also commented that over the years some people had disappeared trying to use routes suggested by locals, usually at night. He didn't give details and quickly changed the subject as if he had said too much. I left with a heavy feeling in my stomach that didn't ease even after I left town. After that conversation, I had a clear sense that the man at the gas station knew exactly what he was doing when he suggested that route. It didn't feel like an innocent tip from someone trying to help a stranger. The more I remembered how casually he talked about the shortcut, the more it sounded rehearsed, like something he had said before to other people. I considered going back to the station to see him again, but the idea made me immediately uncomfortable. I chose to leave town as soon as possible. On my way out, I passed again by the stretch of highway where I had entered that secondary road. In daylight, it looked like just another narrow opening between trees. No sign, no name, no indication that it led anywhere important. Even so, I had the strange feeling that the road looked shorter than it had the night before, as if it didn't have enough space to contain everything I had experienced inside it. I drove the rest of the day thinking about the car without headlights, not about its model or color, which I never managed to identify, but about its behavior. It never tried to pass me, never tried to force me off the road directly. It simply made sure I kept moving at the pace it chose. The idea that if I had stopped or turned off the car, I might not have gotten out of there began to weigh on me more than any supernatural detail. It didn't feel unreal. It felt like something that could happen precisely because it didn't draw attention. A road that doesn't officially exist. A car that refuses to be seen clearly. Someone suggesting a shortcut that leads nowhere safe. After that, I tried to put it behind me, but I couldn't. The feeling of having passed through a place that shouldn't exist stuck with me. It wasn't just fear. It was physical discomfort, as if my body had understood something before my mind did. At various moments, I caught myself thinking about what would have happened if I had trusted the man at the station a bit more, if I had relaxed, slowed down too much, or decided to stop and confront the car behind me. Nothing about the situation felt improvised. Everything worked because I kept moving. That idea began repeating in my head like a delayed warning. That road seemed to demand that you keep going, that you not question it, that you not stop. And the car without headlights was there to ensure exactly that. I also began to realize how the shortcut never had a clear beginning or a defined end. I simply entered it and at some point, exited. There was no marker, no signage, no clear transition. It was as if I had driven through an interval that wasn't part of the normal map of things. When I got home days later, I inspected my car thoroughly, almost expecting to find some damage or sign that something physical had happened. There was nothing. The fuel level was what it should have been. The odometer showed nothing strange. Still, I knew I had spent far too long there for it to have been just an ordinary road. As the weeks went by, I began to notice that the episode had changed how I reacted to small suggestions from strangers. Before, I always accepted local tips without much thought, especially in small towns where that's usually normal. After Tennessee, any suggestion of a better route, like quick shortcut or less used road, immediately made me suspicious. It wasn't paranoia, it was memory. The image of the dark road, the blank GPS, and the car without headlights came back fully, without effort. What bothered me most was realizing that if I hadn't asked anything at that gas station, I might never have entered that place. It wasn't something that found me by chance. It was something I accepted, thinking I was just making life easier. Sometime later, I talked with another colleague who worked in the same region and mentioned, without many details, that secondary road. He interrupted me before I even finished and told me never to accept that kind of suggestion there, especially at night. He said there were old stories of people who took alternative routes and never reached where they intended, or simply never reached anywhere at all. He said it seriously, without joking, and quickly changed the subject. That closed the circle for me. It wasn't a poorly marked road. It was a place that shouldn't be used as a passage. And the car without headlights wasn't trying to force me out of there. It was making sure I kept moving until I found the right exit, before it was too late. After hearing that, I stopped looking for alternative explanations. I no longer tried to convince myself it had been just coincidence or nighttime nerves. There was a pattern there, and it didn't require believing in anything beyond reality. A road that doesn't appear on official maps, locals indicating it with unnatural casualness, and reports of disappearances tied to that kind of shortcut were more than enough to make everything feel disturbingly plausible. The car without headlights stopped being the strangest element and became the most logical one. It wasn't there to attack me. It was there to keep me moving, to make sure I didn't stop in the wrong place at the wrong time. That completely changes how I understand that night. It didn't feel like a direct threat, it felt like a mechanism working as intended. Today, when I think about that stretch of rural Tennessee, what stands out most is how quiet everything was. No horn, no flashing lights, no clear attempt at communication. Just following, just adjusting speed, just constant presence. If I had panicked and stopped, I might not have made it out. And that possibility stays with me to this day when I drive through unfamiliar areas at night. I don't take shortcuts, I don't follow roads that don't clearly appear on maps, and I don't trust vague directions given too casually. That road never officially existed, but for long enough that night, it was far too real. And the fact that I managed to get out doesn't comfort me as much as it should. It only reminds me that not every alternate road is meant to shorten the trip. Some seem to exist only to see who agrees to enter.
Thank you very much for your company until the end. Your support is what gives life to this channel. If these stories have caught you, don't forget to leave your like and comment on your opinion. And if you are not yet part of our community, sign up now to receive the next real horror stories.